What if everything you thought was stable, your currency, your country's power, your very way of life, was already crumbling beneath your feet? We're living through the unraveling of a world order. You can feel it in the chaos of politics, the widening gap between rich and poor, the rising tension between superpowers, and the slow erosion of trust in institutions. But what if none of this is new? In this video, we dive into Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order by billionaire investor Ray Dalio, and explore what Stoic philosophy teaches us about surviving and thriving in times of turmoil. Dalio spent 50 years studying the rise and fall of empires, from the Dutch to the British and now the US, and he discovered patterns that repeat with painful accuracy. Once you see these cycles, you can't unsee them. More importantly, you can prepare. How can we respond, not with fear, but with calm, reason, and resilience? That's where Stoicism comes in. If history is repeating, then Stoicism might be the mindset we desperately need. Stay to the end, because understanding this one principle could be the difference between collapse and control. Have you ever had one of those moments when the world just doesn't make sense? That's exactly what happened to Ray Dalio in 1971. Back then, Dalio was just a young guy, fresh out of college, working on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. One evening, President Nixon went on live television and said something that would shake the foundations of the global financial system. It didn't sound alarming on the surface. Politicians rarely say things outright. But what Nixon essentially said was this: the United States was breaking its promise. The dollar would no longer be backed by gold. Now, if you've never thought about what that means, let's simplify it. Before 1971, the US dollar was like a check you could take to the bank in exchange for gold. Gold was the real money. Dollars were just a placeholder, a promise. But by 1971, America had printed far more dollars than it had gold to back them. And people around the world were beginning to cash in their dollars for gold. The US was bleeding gold reserves, so Nixon did what no leader had dared to do before. He closed the gold window. And just like that, money changed. Here's where it gets interesting. Dalio, like any rational person, thought this was a disaster. Surely the stock market would crash. So the next morning, he rushed to work expecting chaos, but when the bell rang, the market went up, not down, up by nearly 25%. Why? Because when a government says we don't have enough money and then decides to just print more, that money becomes worth less. But assets like stocks, gold, and commodities, their value goes up, because now there's more money chasing the same amount of stuff. And here's where Dalio's first big principle was born. When central banks print a lot of money to solve a crisis, the value of money falls, and the value of real assets rises. Let that sink in. This is not just about 1971, it's a cycle. Dalio saw that this had happened before, in 1933 under FDR, and would happen again in 2008 and 2020. It's a recurring theme in history, and if history repeats, then understanding the pattern gives you an edge, not just financially, but mentally. Because when everyone else is panicking, the Stoic stays calm, not because they ignore the chaos, but because they understand it. Let's pause and ask, how does this apply to us today? Look around. Governments are in debt, inflation is rising, interest rates have been cut, then raised again. Central banks have printed trillions. Real estate prices are inflated. People are wondering, is this sustainable? Is my savings safe? Should I invest or hold back? This is where Dalio's principle and Stoic wisdom meet. Stoicism teaches us that we don't control external events, but we do control how we respond. The Stoic doesn't fear change. He anticipates it. He studies the past to prepare for the future. And when he sees patterns, he acts. Not out of panic, but with principle. So what's the principle here for you and me? It's this: When the world seems uncertain, don't just follow the noise. Follow the patterns. When governments print money, don't hoard cash. Understand that it will lose value. Invest in assets that historically hold or gain value in inflationary times, like gold, real estate, or certain stocks. But even deeper than financial advice, the Stoic message is this: be prepared, be rational, be centered. Let me give you a modern example. During the COVID-19 crisis in 2020, the Federal Reserve printed more money in months than in any year in U.S. history. What happened? Stocks soared. So did Bitcoin. So did housing prices. But what else happened? Supply chains broke down, prices at the grocery store rose, and the value of every dollar in your pocket quietly shrank. People were shocked. But if you understood the 1971 story, if you knew the pattern, this was all predictable. It's a pattern of overspending, of avoiding hard choices. Governments love to spend, but they hate to raise taxes. So what do? They borrow and print, and for a while it feels good. But eventually, reality hits. Currencies lose value, people lose faith, and then the cycle begins again. If you're thinking, this sounds depressing, I get it, but this is where Stoicism offers a powerful shift in mindset. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." When you understand these economic cycles, you stop being a victim of surprise. You start becoming a strategist. You prepare, you adapt, you build your life not on shifting sand, but on solid ground. So what can you do right now, practically? Here are a few Stoic-inspired actions anyone can take. 1. Educate yourself. Study history. Watch patterns. Learn from the past. 2. Diversify wisely. Don't put your trust in a single currency. Think globally. 3. Live below your means. Excess leads to fragility. Simplicity builds strength. 4. Stay calm in storms. Economic crisis, political chaos. Don't react, respond. 5. Focus on what you can control. Your work ethic, your skills, your mindset. I'll leave you with this. What happened in 1971 wasn't the end. It was a transformation. A signal. And we're seeing similar signals again today. The question is, will you be like Dalio in 1971, surprised and unprepared? Or will you be the one who sees the shift, who stays grounded, and who turns uncertainty into opportunity? That's the Stoic way. Let's step back for a moment and ask a big question. What exactly is a world order? It sounds like something out of a history book, right? But it's actually happening around us right now. An order is simply a system, a set of rules. It's how people and countries agree to live, trade, govern, and solve problems. There are internal orders, like a country's constitution, its laws, and how people relate to each other inside that country. And there's a world order, which is how nations relate to each other. Who leads, who follows, and what rules hold it all together. Right now, we're living in what's called the American-led world order, established after World War II. The U.S. came out on top and helped create systems like the United Nations, the World Bank, and the IMF. It also set the global financial rules through something called the Bretton Woods Agreement. But here's the thing, no order lasts forever. Just like in life, everything has a cycle. Empires rise, grow strong, then overreach, weaken, and eventually fall. And when one order ends, another begins. Think of it like a relay race. The baton of power is passed from one runner to the next, from the Dutch to the British to the Americans, and maybe soon to China. You see, orders don't collapse overnight. They fade. Trust erodes, systems crack, and new powers start to assert themselves. Here's where Stoicism comes in. The Stoic doesn't cling to illusions. He sees the world as it is, not as he wishes it to be. He knows that change is natural, even necessary, so rather than resist it, he prepares for it. Rationally, calmly, and in a world where rules are being rewritten, that mindset is your superpower. Don't fear the shift. Understand the pattern. Adapt to the change, and lead yourself with clarity while the world learns to follow. Okay, so now we understand what a world order is and that it always changes. But how do we actually measure where a country stands in this rise and fall cycle? Ray Dalio answers that question with something brilliant. 8 key indicators, metrics that tell us how powerful and stable a nation really is, beyond just headlines or military might. Let's break them down one by one. And while we go through them, think about your own country. Where is it strong? Where is it slipping? 1. Education. It all starts here. A nation's future depends on how well it teaches its people, not just facts, but also character, critical thinking, and values. The Roman Empire flourished when it emphasized education. So did China under the Tang dynasty. Today, countries with strong education systems like Finland or Singapore consistently punch above their weight. Want to know where a nation's headed? Look at how it treats its teachers. 2. Innovation and technology development. Empires rise when they invent. Think of the British Industrial Revolution or Silicon Valley's tech boom. When a country stops innovating, it starts decaying. Just look at how once powerful nations fell behind when they failed to adapt to the next wave of technology. 3. Competitiveness in global markets. Can you make something the world wants and make it better, cheaper, faster? This determines a country's economic influence. China's rise in manufacturing and export over the past 30 years. Textbook example. 4. Economic output. GDP isn't everything, but it tells a powerful story. It reflects how productive a country is, how much value its people and businesses create. More output means more resources for defense, diplomacy, education, and stability. And 5. Share of world trade. Trade is power. If your products, services, and supply chains are essential to the world economy, you hold leverage. The Dutch and British ruled the seas, literally, through trade dominance. Today, look at how vital China is to global supply chains. 6. Military strength. No surprise here, a strong military doesn't just protect borders, it enforces influence, but military alone isn't enough. Many empires collapsed because their military overreached while the economy fell apart. Number 7. Financial center status. This one's often overlooked. The world's capital flows to the most trusted, stable financial centers: Amsterdam, London, New York, and now, watch what's happening in Shanghai. 8. Reserve currency status. This is the crown jewel. When the world trusts your currency, they hold it, trade with it, and save in it. The Dutch had the guilder, the British had the pound, America has the dollar. For now. Now, here's the insight Dalio gives and the Stoic twist. All 8 of these rise together, but they also fall together. They reinforce one another. And when they start to decline, it happens faster than you think. So here's the takeaway. If you want to see the future, watch these 8 metrics, not the media. And if you're a Stoic, you use them not to pant, to prepare, calmly, intelligently, strategically. Which of these 8 is your country strongest in? And which one worries you the most? Let me know in the comments. Up next, what causes a great nation to fall? And how can we learn from it? Have you ever looked at a country and thought, wow, it's unstoppable? We've all had that feeling. A booming economy, advanced technology, world-class education, cultural influence, military dominance. It all feels solid, permanent. But history tells a different story. It tells us that even the greatest empires fall, and they don't fall by accident. They follow a pattern, a cycle. And once you see that cycle, it changes the way you see the world. Ray Dalio calls it the big cycle, and today we're going to walk through it step by step. We'll talk about why empires rise, what makes them peak, and what slowly but surely brings them to their knees. But more importantly, we'll talk about what you can do with this knowledge. How you can prepare your life, your mindset, and your finances using timeless Stoic principles while the world moves through one of the most uncertain periods in modern history. Let's begin. Phase 1. The rise. Every empire's journey starts the same way, with hardship. A group of people, often led by revolutionary thinkers or strong leaders, emerge out of crisis. They are focused, they are disciplined, They know what they want and they're willing to work for it. Think of the United States after its independence, or China after the Communist Revolution in 1949. During this phase, the country builds a new internal order, a system for how people live and work together. This internal stability allows for rapid progress. Leaders invest in education, they encourage innovation, they reward productivity, and most importantly, they build a culture that values hard work, civility, and long-term thinking. Dalio puts it simply, the rise of an empire begins with strong character and ends when that character fades. Empires don't grow through shortcuts, they grow through discipline. And as the country strengthens from within, it starts expanding its influence outward. It becomes competitive in global markets. It builds alliances. Its currency becomes trusted. It becomes a place where capital flows to, not away from. This is the golden age. Prosperity rises, the economy booms, confidence grows, and then the top. Phase 2. The top. This is where things get interesting. At the peak of an empire's power, it looks untouchable. Its economy is massive, its military is strong, its currency is the global standard, its culture is exported around the world. But this is also where the seeds of decline are quietly being planted. Here's what happens. 1. Wealth and power become concentrated. The top 1% control more and more, while the rest stagnate. 2. The next generation grows up in comfort. They didn't fight to build the empire, they inherited it. So their values change. They value leisure over effort, lifestyle over sacrifice. 3. The country begins to borrow heavily. Why raise taxes when you can borrow money and print more of it? 4. The empire starts spending more than it earns, not just domestically but internationally, maintaining a sprawling military presence, trying to hold on to influence everywhere. And at first, no one notices, because everything still looks fine. The military is big, the stock market is high, the cities are glowing, but underneath, the foundation is cracking. This is what the Stoics call false confidence. Seneca wrote, "Success tempts us to believe we are invincible, but the greater danger lies in the success we fail to question. When you stop questioning, you stop improving." Phase 3, the decline. This phase doesn't begin with an explosion, it begins with a whisper. Economic growth slows, debt piles up, interest payments on that debt consume more of the national budget. And here's the kicker, the country still wants to live like it's rich. So what does it do? It prints money. This is the same thing that happened in the US in 1971, and again in 2008, and again in 2020. Each time, printing more money gave short-term relief but long-term weakness. As inflation rises, people start losing faith in the currency. The cost of living increases, the middle class gets squeezed, and the gap between the haves and have-nots becomes a chasm. Social unrest grows. People feel the system is rigged. Populist leaders emerge on both sides, some promising revolution, others promising a return to greatness. Neither addresses the root cause. Meanwhile, foreign rivals start rising. They've been studying, saving, building. They see an opportunity. And here comes the dangerous part. The declining empire tries to hold on to its status by force. More military spending, more international conflicts. But now, it's spending money it doesn't have to fight wars it can't afford. Eventually, the breaking point comes. A financial crisis, a war, a loss of trust in the currency. The world starts moving on. The empire is no longer the center of gravity of are we now. Let's be honest, does any of this sound familiar? Massive national debt, rising inflation, widening wealth gaps, political extremism, rival powers asserting influence, and an entire generation questioning whether the system even works. We're not saying the collapse is here, but the signs of decline, they're hard to ignore. Ray Dalio's message isn't doom and gloom. It's a call to awareness. And the Stoic message is even deeper. Don't panic. Prepare. Stoic tools for a shifting world. So what do we do with this knowledge? We can't control the fall of empires, but we can control how we live through them. Let me give you some Stoic-inspired tools for this moment in history. One, accept reality, not illusion. Don't deny what's happening. Don't pretend everything will stay the same forever. Empires fall, that's not pessimism. It's history, and it's liberating when you stop clinging to false certainty. 2. Build inner wealth. First, skills, character, discipline. The Stoics knew that true wealth comes from what you carry inside, not what's in your account. As Epictetus said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters. 3. Diversify like a strategist. Don't put your faith in a single currency, job, or institution. Think globally. Invest in yourself. Hedge your future like a Stoic general would prepare for war. 4. Cut the fat. Simplify. Live below your means. In times of decline, simplicity isn't just a virtue, it's survival. 5. Strengthen your tribe. You won't thrive alone. Build community. Share knowledge. Support others. Stoicism is not about isolation, it's about resilience together. Final thoughts. The cycle is not your fate. Empires fall. Systems break. Orders change. But your life, your purpose, your values, those are yours to shape. The Stoics lived through collapsing republics, brutal wars, and shifting powers, and yet they found clarity, calm, and meaning. So can we. Marcus Aurelius ruled during the decline of Rome and still found peace through philosophy. So let's borrow his mindset. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. If this message resonates with you, leave a comment. What's one way you're preparing, not just financially but mentally, for the changes ahead? We've talked about how empires rise. We've talked about how they reach their peak. Now let's talk about the hardest part, the one most people don't want to hear. The internal rot. The slow unraveling. The crisis from within. Because here's the truth. Most empires don't fall because of war or some sudden catastrophe. They fall because of what's happening inside. The divisions, the inequality, the loss of shared values. This part of the story hits close to home. Let's break it down to the gap. As an empire reaches the top, it starts to enjoy massive wealth. But that wealth, it's rarely shared equally. The rich get richer, the poor stay where they are, or fall further behind. This isn't just an economic issue, it's emotional, it's psychological. It erodes the very glue that holds a society together. Trust. People begin to feel the system is unfair, the rules seem rigged. If you're born poor, it feels like the game is already over before you start playing. This leads to resentment, anger, division. The haves and have-nots drift further apart, not just financially, but in how they see the world. And it doesn't stop there. Values begin to split. During the rise of an empire, people are united by common goals, survival, growth, strength. But during the decline, those shared values start to break down. One group says, let's change everything. Another says, let's go back to the way things were. Sound familiar? What's happening here isn't new. Dalio points out that this internal conflict between generations, classes, ideologies is one of the most consistent signs of a declining order. Look at Rome. Look at the British Empire. Even look at the US during the Civil War. Whenever a society forgets why it exists, what it stands for, it starts to tear itself apart. The financial crash is just a symptom. Eventually, the debt piles up. Governments, trying to please everyone and avoid hard choices, spend more than they take in. And when they can't tax more or borrow more, they do the thing they've always done. They print money. Printing money seems like a quick fix, but it doesn't create real value. It dilutes the value of what already exists. Inflation rises, the cost of living soars, savings lose value, wages don't keep up. The middle class, once the backbone of the nation, gets squeezed from both ends, and when the financial pressure hits home, people look for someone to blame. Enter conflict. When life gets harder and inequality gets worse, division deepens. Political parties become tribes, news becomes ammunition. Social media becomes a battlefield. And that's when the dangerous voices start to rise. Populists, extremists, false prophets with easy answers. It's their fault. They're stealing from you. If only we could go back. If only we had someone strong enough to fix it. This happens on both sides of the spectrum. Left-wing populists want to tear the system down and redistribute wealth. Right-wing populists want to protect the status quo and consolidate control. Neither is interested in balance. Both are symptoms of a deeper disease, a society that has lost its center, from crisis to collapse. If nothing is done to heal these divisions, the system breaks, sometimes slowly like a slow leak in a dam, sometimes suddenly like a tidal wave. You get riots, you get revolutions, you get political assassinations, constitutional breakdowns, and yes, sometimes even civil war. We've seen this in history more times than we can count. China's Cultural Revolution, the French Revolution, the fall of the Roman Republic into dictatorship, and all of them followed the same path. Internal inequality, resentment, polarization, unrest, collapse. So the question is, what can we do? Here's where Stoicism becomes our compass, because while we may not control the fall of an empire, we can control how we live through it. Let's talk about some Stoic principles that can guide us through internal crisis, whether it's in your country, your company, or even your family. 1. Focus on your sphere of control. You can't fix the world overnight. You can't control who gets elected or what policies are passed, but you can control your actions, your habits, your values. Epictetus said, "Some things are in our control and others are not." That's your power. That's your anchor in the storm. 2. Build inner strength over outer comfort. In declining empires, comfort becomes a drug. People chase distractions, luxury, fame, pleasure, while their society crumbles. The Stoics took the opposite approach. They practiced hardship, voluntary discomfort, discipline, fortitude. Seneca would sleep on the floor and eat plain food, not because he had to, but because he chose to. He was training for adversity. You can do the same. 3. Invest in real relationships. When society fragments, connection becomes your safety net. Build community, not just online, but offline. Talk to your neighbors, help your friends, strengthen your family. Because when the system fails, it's not the institutions that catch you. It's the people. 4. Study history, like it's a survival manual. Most people are surprised by crisis, but you don't have to be. Dalio studied 500 years of empire cycles. The Stoics lived through some of history's most brutal chapters. We have the benefit of their wisdom. Learn from it. History doesn't just teach, it warns. Number 5, create stability where you can. In a time of decay, you become the order, you become the structure, the example. That means managing your money wisely, developing skills that are useful no matter the system, becoming someone others can rely on. You don't need to be a president or general to lead. Sometimes the greatest strength is shown in how you carry yourself when everything around you is breaking down. A final reflection: empires fall, currencies collapse, societies divide. But human wisdom, that endures. So do courage, discipline, purpose. The Stoics didn't avoid crisis. They faced it with open eyes, steady breath, and strong hearts. So if you're feeling anxious about the state of the world, good. That means you're paying attention. But don't let that anxiety turn into fear. Let it become fuel, fuel to prepare, fuel to strengthen, fuel to lead. Because in the end, it's not the empire that defines you. It's how you live while it rises and while it falls. We've talked about how empires rise. We've talked about how they decline through debt, division, and decay from within. But now comes the final chapter in the story of a great power, the international conflict, the global tension, the moment the old order is truly tested and often replaced. Let's break it down. The shift from internal to external pressure. When an empire begins to weaken from the inside, the outside world notices. Rising powers, countries that have been waiting, watching, preparing, they start to challenge the status quo. They see the cracks. They smell opportunity. And here's where the decline picks up speed. Because as the dominant power tries to hold on to its influence, it often overreaches. More military spending, more foreign interventions, more promises to protect allies and project power, even when it's already running on empty. Dalio points this out clearly. The cost of maintaining an empire eventually exceeds the benefit. That's when decline turns from slow to sudden. Real-world example, US versus China. Let's look at a current case. The United States and China. One is the current global leader, militarily, financially, culturally. The other rising challenger, with growing economic might, technological innovation, and geopolitical ambition. And tensions are rising. Whether it's trade wars, technology restrictions, military exercises in the South China Sea, or diplomatic disputes over Taiwan, the world is watching two giants circle each other. Does that mean war is inevitable? No. But history tells us this. When the ruling empire weakens and a rival grows stronger, conflict becomes more likely. It might be economic, it might be political, it might even be psychological, like a cold war of narratives and influence. But sooner or later, the world adjusts, and that adjustment is rarely peaceful. The currency collapse, the final blow. There's one more sign that an empire's time is up. Its currency loses trust. When global investors stop believing in a nation's ability to pay its debts, they sell off that country's bonds, stocks, and, most critically, its currency. The dollar, for example, has been the world's reserve currency for decades. But what happens if inflation keeps rising, if debt keeps climbing, if political chaos shakes confidence? At some point, people stop saving in dollars, and when that day comes, it's game over. It's what happened to the Dutch guilder, the British pound. And if history rhymes, it's what could happen to the US dollar too. What does the end look like? The end of a cycle doesn't always mean bombs falling from the sky. It's more subtle than that. It looks like allies drifting away, trade deals breaking down, a once powerful country being ignored at the global table, its currency being replaced by alternatives, and its citizens realizing they're no longer living in the center of the world. It's not loud. It's quiet, a slow fade. But once the tipping point is reached, it accelerates fast. Stoic wisdom in a world of global shifts. Here's where Stoicism shines brightest. Because in times of war, uncertainty, and decline, what matters most is your mindset. You can't control whether two nations go to war, but you can control how you prepare, how you respond, and how you lead your life. Here are 3 Stoic principles to carry with you. 1. Don't be shocked by what is natural. Empires fall. That's not the exception, it's the rule. Marcus Aurelius put it well, all things are subject to change and everything passes away. Expect change, study the pattern, stay grounded when the world tilts. 2. Detach from what you can't control. You can't stop inflation in Washington or military drills in the Pacific, but you can strengthen your savings, learn new skills, and build a resilient life. Epictetus reminds us, freedom is the only worthy goal in life, and it is achieved by controlling your own mind. 3. Be a citizen of the world, not just a nation. Stoics believed in a universal brotherhood, and in an era of shifting borders and global realignment, that mindset is powerful. Stay curious, stay adaptable. Don't lock yourself into one identity or ideology. Final thought. Cycles end, but wisdom grows. Every empire has its moment, and every moment ends. But your purpose doesn't end with the fall of a flag. Your character doesn't collapse with a currency. So yes, the world is changing. But maybe that's not the end. Maybe it's the beginning of a wiser, more resilient version of you. The future. What can we do to avoid collapse? So we've reached the final question in the series, and it might be the most important one of all. If history shows that empires always decline, is there anything we can actually do to avoid collapse? And here's the surprising truth. Yes, there is. But it starts not with governments or presidents. It starts with us. Ray Dalio, after studying hundreds of years of empire cycles, boiled it down to 2 basic things. Earn more than you spend. Treat each other well. Simple? Yes. Easy? Absolutely not. But these 2 principles are like the immune system of a nation. When they're strong, the country stays healthy. When they're weak, decline is inevitable. Let's break them down. 1. Earn more than you spend. This applies to governments. but it also applies to you and me, and you and me. We live in a culture that rewards consumption. Buy now, pay later. But a Stoic mindset flips that. It asks, what do I need to thrive, not just today, but long term? Living below your means isn't just financial wisdom, it's philosophical discipline. It trains us to delay gratification, to prioritize essentials, and to prepare for uncertainty. Rome didn't fall in a day, but it overspent for decades. The same is true for households. Avoiding personal collapse starts with living within your limits and building reserves, mental, emotional, and financial. 2. Treat each other well. This one's harder, because during times of stress, economic, political, cultural, people turn against each other. They pick sides, they blame, they isolate. But the Stoics taught the opposite, that we are all citizens of the same world. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What injures the hive injures the bee." When we treat others with dignity, with fairness, with compassion, we strengthen the entire system. That means honest conversations. That means helping when you can, even if it's small. That means refusing to be pulled into hatred, even when fear is loud and anger feels easy. Because collapse doesn't start with economics. It starts when people forget how to be human with each other. Final thought, it starts with you. You don't need to run a country to protect your future. You just need to live wisely. Spend responsibly, lead with kindness, and think long-term in a world built on short-term noise. The Stoics survived wars, plagues, exiles, and empire collapses, not because they had power, but because they had principles. So can we. So what can we take away from all of this? Empires rise and fall. Economies boom and bust. The world changes, sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once. But the one constant through it all is you. Your mindset, your choices, your values. Stoicism teaches us that while we can't control the tide, we can learn to sail through the storm. With clarity, with discipline, with compassion. If this video helped you see the bigger picture or even just pause to reflect, thank you for spending your time here. It means a lot. If you'd like to explore more ideas like this, consider hitting the like button, subscribing to the channel, and dropping a comment below. Let me know, what's one Stoic habit you're building to stay grounded in a shifting world? And as always, stay steady, stay curious, and stay kind. Until next time.